The emergency alarm screamed through Station Kepler 7 like the dying wails of 1,000 tortured souls. Commander Zethara's 4 eyes widened as the red warning lights bathed the security center in an ominous crimson glow. Her tentacles moved frantically across the control panels while her secondary arms reached for the emergency communication device. "All units, this is not a drill," she broadcast, her voice carrying the weight of absolute terror. "Containment breach in Sector 7. The Void Stalker has escaped. I repeat, the Void Stalker has escaped." The silence that followed was more terrifying than the alarms. Every being on the station knew what those words meant. The Void Stalker wasn't just any prisoner. It was the single most dangerous creature ever captured in the known galaxy. A being so deadly that 3 different species had gone extinct just trying to study it. The creature stood 12 feet tall, covered in scales harder than diamond, with razor-sharp claws that could cut through reinforced titanium like paper. Its bite contained enough venom to kill a Gortharian battle beast in seconds, and its intelligence was matched only by its pure, unfiltered rage against all living things. Security Chief Morin, a hulking Krillian warrior with scars covering his gray hide, burst into the command center. His usual calm demeanor had cracked, revealing the fear underneath. How did this happen? The containment field was specifically designed to hold creatures 10 times its strength. Zethara's tentacles trembled as she pulled up the security footage. The field didn't fail. It just walked through it, like it wasn't even there. She paused the video and pointed at the screen. "Look at this." The creature touched the energy barrier, and it simply dissolved. We've never seen anything like it. The footage showed the Void Stalker in its containment cell, a massive circular room with walls 3 feet thick, surrounded by enough energy to power a small city. The creature had been pacing, as it always did, its black eyes reflecting an intelligence that made every researcher uncomfortable. Then, without warning, it had approached the barrier and placed one clawed hand against the shimmering energy field. The barrier had flickered, then faded completely, leaving nothing between the galaxy's deadliest predator and the rest of the station. "Sir," called out Operative Vex, a young Altarian whose blue skin had turned pale with fear. "We're getting reports of movement in the residential sector. Multiple families are trapped in their quarters." Morin's combat instincts kicked in immediately. "Lock down everything. Every corridor, every room, every air vent. Nothing gets through without our knowledge." He turned to Zethara. "How many civilians do we have on board?" 3,247, she replied, her voice barely a whisper. "Including the human research team and their families." The mention of humans made everyone pause. Humans were the newest species to join the Galactic Council, and their presence on research stations was still relatively rare. Most species found humans unsettling, not because they were dangerous, but because they were unpredictable. Humans had a tendency to do things that defied all logic, often with surprising results. The human research team on Kepler 7 consisted of Dr. Sarah Chen, a xenobiologist studying extreme life forms, her husband Dr. Marcus Chen, a physicist working on containment technology, and their 3-year-old daughter Emma. "Focus all security teams on protecting the civilian sectors," Morin ordered, "and get me a direct line to the human quarters. If that thing is headed for populated areas, they need to know what they're dealing with." As security teams scrambled throughout the station, the Void Stalker moved with purpose through the maintenance corridors. It had spent months studying the layout of the station, memorizing every pathway, every weakness, but it wasn't heading randomly toward populated areas. It had a specific destination in mind. The creature's enhanced senses could detect the unique biochemical signatures of different species from incredible distances. Krillians smelled of metal and sulfur. Altarians carried the scent of ozone and ice. Gortharians reeked of ammonia and decay. But there was one scent that stood out among all others. One that the Void Stalker had never encountered before arriving at this station. Humans. They smelled of warmth and something else. Something the creature couldn't identify but found curious. Not threatening. Not prey-like, but different in a way that activated neural pathways in its brain that had been dormant for centuries. The Void Stalker had been captured on a dead world at the edge of the galaxy, a place where it had lived alone for so long that it had almost forgotten what it felt like to be near other living beings. But these humans stirred something deep within its genetic memory. In the human quarters, Dr. Sarah Chen was reading a bedtime story to her daughter Emma when the alarms began. The little girl, with her bright brown eyes and curly black hair, looked up from her picture book with more curiosity than fear. "Mommy, what's that noise?" Emma asked, her small hands still clutching her stuffed dinosaur. Sarah tried to keep her voice calm, but she had worked with enough dangerous specimens to know what a containment breach sounded like. "It's just a safety drill, sweetheart. We need to stay in our room for a while." Dr. Marcus Chen was already at the communication panel, trying to reach the security center. "The lines are jammed," he said, his voice tight with worry. "Whatever's happening, it's big." Sarah moved to the reinforced window that looked out into the station's main corridor. The hallways were empty, except for the flashing emergency lights. She had studied the security protocols extensively during her orientation, and she knew that a full lockdown meant something truly dangerous was loose on the station. "Marcus, help me move the furniture against the door," she whispered, not wanting to frighten Emma. Just as a precaution, as they quietly barricaded their quarters, neither of them noticed the small ventilation grate near the ceiling beginning to vibrate slightly. The Void Stalker had found them. The creature moved through the ventilation system with surprising grace for something so large. Its body could compress and expand in ways that defied normal anatomy, allowing it to navigate spaces that should have been impossible for a being of its size. As it approached the human quarters, the unusual scent grew stronger, and with it came something the Void Stalker hadn't felt in over 1,000 years. Curiosity. Not hunger, not the desire to kill, but genuine interest in these strange new creatures. Their biochemistry was unlike anything in its extensive genetic memory. They weren't prey. They weren't predators. They were something entirely different. The Void Stalker positioned itself above the main room of the human quarters and carefully began to remove the ventilation grate. Its claws, capable of shredding starship hulls, worked with delicate precision to avoid making any noise. Through the opening, it could see the two adult humans moving furniture, their movements quick and efficient despite their obvious fear. But what caught its attention was the small human sitting on a bed in the corner. Emma had grown bored with her parents' game of moving furniture and had returned to her picture book. She was making soft sound effects as she turned the pages, completely absorbed in her story about friendly dragons and brave knights. The Void Stalker found itself mesmerized by her complete lack of fear, her innocent concentration, and the way she hummed quietly to herself. For several minutes, the galaxy's most dangerous predator simply watched a human toddler read a book. Then Emma looked up. Their eyes met through the ventilation opening, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. The Void Stalker expected the small human to scream, to alert the adults, to show the terror that every other living being displayed when they saw it. Instead, Emma smiled and waved. "Hi, kitty," she whispered, apparently thinking the creature's dark eyes belonged to some kind of large cat. The Void Stalker was so shocked by this reaction that it nearly lost its grip on the ventilation shaft. In its entire existence, spanning millennia, no creature had ever greeted it with anything other than fear or aggression. This tiny being not only showed no fear, but seemed genuinely happy to see it. Emma glanced toward her parents, who were still focused on barricading the door, then looked back up at the creature. With the kind of logic that only made sense to a 3-year-old, she climbed onto a chair and then onto her desk to get closer to the new kitty in the ceiling. "Are you stuck?" she asked in her tiny voice. "My daddy can help you. He fixes things." The Void Stalker found itself completely paralyzed by this interaction. Its predatory instincts, honed over thousands of years, simply had no response for a creature that treated it with kindness and offered help. Every fiber of its being was designed for violence and survival. But this small human was triggering responses that it didn't even know existed in its neural structure. Emma reached up toward the opening, her small hand barely able to reach the edge. "Come down, kitty. I have books. Do you like stories?" Against every instinct, against every learned behavior, the Void Stalker found itself responding to the child's invitation. It carefully lowered itself through the opening, its massive form somehow managing to fit through the space that should have been far too small. As it emerged into the room, its full size became apparent. Standing 12 feet tall, covered in midnight black scales that seemed to absorb light, with claws like curved swords and teeth that could crush steel, the Void Stalker was a nightmare made flesh. Its presence filled the room with an aura of barely contained violence that made the air itself seem heavy and oppressive. Emma clapped her hands together in delight. "You're really big, kitty." Dr. Sarah Chen turned at the sound of her daughter's voice and froze. Her scientific mind tried to process what she was seeing, but the sight of the galaxy's most dangerous creature standing in her daughter's room made her rational thoughts scatter like frightened birds. She opened her mouth to scream, to warn her husband, to do something, but no sound came out. Marcus looked up from the communication panel and dropped his tools. The metallic clatter seemed incredibly loud in the sudden silence. The Void Stalker's attention briefly shifted to the adults, and for a moment, its natural predatory instincts reasserted themselves. These were potential threats, creatures that might try to harm it or separate it from this fascinating small being. Its claws extended slightly, and a low growl began to build in its throat. But then Emma stepped between the creature and her parents. Her small arms spread wide as if she could protect them from something 50 times her size. "No, kitty," she said firmly, using the same tone she used when scolding her stuffed animals. "We don't growl at people. That's not nice." The Void Stalker looked down at this impossibly brave child who was trying to protect her family from it, and something fundamental shifted in its ancient mind. The growling stopped. The claws retracted. For the first time in its long existence, the galaxy's deadliest predator sat down. Emma beamed at this apparent sign of obedience. "Good kitty." She patted its massive leg, her tiny hand barely covering a single scale. "Do you want to see my books?" The creature found itself nodding, a gesture it had never made before but somehow understood. Emma scrambled back onto her bed and began pulling out her collection of picture books. "This one is about dinosaurs," she explained, holding up a colorful book. "And this one has dragons, but they're nice dragons. They help people instead of being scary." She paused and looked at the creature thoughtfully. "Are you a nice dragon?" The Void Stalker had never been called nice before. It had been called many things: terrifying, deadly, abomination, nightmare, but never nice. It nodded again, surprising itself. Meanwhile, Sarah and Marcus remained frozen, their minds struggling to process the impossible scene before them. Their 3-year-old daughter was having a casual conversation with a creature that could level a small city, and the creature was responding like a trained pet. "Marcus," Sarah whispered without moving her lips, "call security." Very slowly. But before Marcus could reach for the communication panel, alarms began sounding throughout the station again. This time, however, they weren't the general emergency alarms. These were the specific tones that indicated security teams were moving through the area. "They're coming for me," the Void Stalker said, speaking for the first time since its escape. Its voice was like grinding stone and distant thunder, a sound that made the walls vibrate. Emma looked up from her book. "Who's coming? Are they mean?" "They want to put me back in the cage," the creature explained, its voice becoming softer when addressing the child. "They're afraid of me." Emma considered this with the serious expression that children get when confronting adult problems. "Do you want to go back to the cage?" "No," the Void Stalker admitted, "but I have nowhere else to go. Everyone fears me. Everyone wants me contained or destroyed." "That's silly," Emma declared with the absolute certainty of a toddler. "You're not scary. You're just big, and you're sad." She looked at her parents. "Daddy, can the kitty stay with us?" Sarah found her voice at last. "Emma, sweetheart, that's not a kitty." "I know," Emma replied matter-of-factly. "But he's sad and lonely. Like when I'm sad and you give me hugs." She turned back to the Void Stalker. "Do you want a hug?" The question hit the ancient creature like a physical blow. No being had ever offered it comfort, kindness, or physical affection. The very concept was so foreign that it took several moments for the creature to understand what the child was suggesting. I might hurt you," the Void Stalker said carefully. "My body is dangerous, My touch brings death. Emma walked up to the creature and, without hesitation, wrapped her tiny arms around one of its massive legs. See? You're warm. Warm things aren't dangerous. The creature looked down at the small human clinging to its leg, her face pressed against scales that could deflect energy weapons, and felt something it had never experienced before. A warmth that had nothing to do with temperature spread through its chest. And for the first time in its existence, the Void Stalker understood what the humans called affection. The sound of heavy footsteps in the corridor broke the moment. Security teams were approaching, armed with weapons specifically designed to take down the galaxy's most dangerous predator. The Void Stalker could smell the ozone from their energy weapons and the metallic tang of their armor. "They're here," it said quietly. Emma looked toward the door, then back at the creature. With the kind of determination that made humans simultaneously the most frustrating and most admirable species in the galaxy, she climbed onto the creature's back. "Then we better go," she announced. "Adventure time." The Void Stalker felt the child's weight on its back, her small hands gripping its scales like a rider mounting a pony, and made a decision that would change the fate of the entire galaxy. Instead of fighting, instead of destroying everything in its path to escape, it would protect this one pure soul who had shown it kindness. As security forces prepared to breach the door, the galaxy's deadliest creature and a human toddler prepared for the adventure of a lifetime. The reinforced door to the Chen family quarters exploded inward. As Security Chief Morin and his elite team breached the room, they entered with weapons raised, energy rifles charged, and ready to fire, expecting to find carnage and destruction. Instead, they found Dr. Sarah and Marcus Chen standing unharmed but bewildered, pointing toward an empty room. "Where is it?" Morin demanded, his massive frame filling the doorway as his eyes swept the space for any sign of the Void Stalker. Sarah struggled to find words. They. Emma." She pointed toward the large ventilation grate that now lay twisted and bent outward. "It took our daughter." "Took her?" Morin's voice carried disbelief. "The Void Stalker doesn't take prisoners. It destroys everything it encounters." Marcus stepped forward, his face pale but his voice steady with the precision of a scientist. "Chief Morin, what we witnessed defies everything we know about that creature. It didn't attack. It communicated. It seemed gentle with Emma." "Gentle?" Operative Vex's translator struggled with the concept as applied to the galaxy's most feared predator. "Sir, that's impossible. The Void Stalker has never shown mercy to any living being. Its psychological profile indicates pure aggression and hatred toward all life forms." But even as Vex spoke, reports were flooding in from across the station. The creature had been spotted in 3 different sections, moving through areas populated by civilians, and yet there were no casualties, no deaths, no injuries. Camera feeds showed glimpses of a massive dark form moving with impossible speed through corridors, but always avoiding direct contact with other beings. Commander Zethara's voice crackled through the communication system. "All teams, this is command. We have visual confirmation. The creature is in Hydroponics Bay 7, and there's a human child with it. The child appears unharmed and is riding on its back." The silence that followed this announcement was profound. Every security officer, every scientist, every being on the station who heard those words struggled to process information that contradicted everything they knew about both the Void Stalker and basic survival instincts. In Hydroponics Bay 7, Emma Chen was having the time of her life. The massive bay stretched out like a jungle of strange alien plants, their phosphorescent leaves casting an otherworldly glow throughout the vast space. Streams of nutrient-rich water flowed through carefully maintained channels, creating a symphony of gentle splashing sounds that mixed with the quiet hum of the growth accelerators. "This is pretty, Kitty," Emma said, her small voice filled with wonder as they moved between towering fern-like structures that seemed to reach toward the artificial stars embedded in the ceiling. "It's like the fairy garden in my books." The Void Stalker found itself seeing the hydroponics bay through the child's eyes. Where it had always perceived tactical advantages and potential ambush points, Emma saw beauty and magic. The creature's advanced sensory array, designed to detect threats and identify weaknesses, instead found itself cataloging the way the light reflected in Emma's dark eyes and how her laughter echoed among the leaves. "Why did you live in a cage?" Emma asked, adjusting her position on the creature's back with the unconscious balance of a child who had never known fear. "Cages are for animals that don't know better." "You know better." The question struck deep into memories that the Void Stalker had buried for centuries. "I was not always in a cage, small one. I once lived on a world where creatures like me ran free among mountains that touched the sky and oceans that stretched beyond the horizon. What happened to your world?" Emma's voice carried the genuine curiosity that only children possess, innocent of the horror such questions might contain. The creature's pace slowed as ancient pain surfaced. "War. My people fought among ourselves until nothing remained but ash and silence. I was the last, the only survivor of a species that had forgotten how to live in peace." Emma was quiet for a moment, processing this information with the startling empathy that humans seemed to possess naturally. "That's really sad. But you're not alone anymore. You have me now." The simple declaration carried more weight than any treaty or alliance ever signed in the galactic halls of power. The Void Stalker, whose existence had been defined by isolation and violence, suddenly understood what the humans called family. Their journey through the hydroponics bay was interrupted by the appearance of Security Chief Morin and a squad of heavily armed officers at the main entrance. The team had their weapons drawn but hesitated to fire with a human child so close to their target. "Creature," Morin called out, his voice echoing among the plants. "Release the child immediately. We have no desire to harm either of you, but we cannot allow this situation to continue." The Void Stalker turned to face the security team, its massive form shifting to place itself between Emma and the weapons. Its natural defensive instincts activated, claws extending and muscles tensing for combat. "No, kitty," Emma said softly, patting the creature's neck. "Remember what we talked about? No growling at people." The change was immediate and visible. The Void Stalker's aggressive posture relaxed, its claws retracted, and the threatening aura that had made the security team step backward simply evaporated. Emma waved at the officers from her perch on the creature's back. "Hi, Mr. Security People. Are you here to see the pretty plants too?" Morin's weapon lowered involuntarily. In 30 years of military and security service, he had never encountered anything that challenged his understanding of reality quite like this scene. "Child, are you harmed? Has the creature injured you in any way?" "His name isn't the creature," Emma replied with the indignation of someone correcting an adult's poor manners. "He's my friend. And he's very gentle. See?" She slid down from the Void Stalker's back and walked over to one of its massive legs, hugging it affectionately. The security team exchanged glances. Their weapons, designed to stop the galaxy's most dangerous predator, seemed absurdly inappropriate for the scene unfolding before them. "Emma, Doctor." Sarah Chen's voice came through Morin's communicator as she and her husband were patched into the situation. "Sweetheart, please come away from there. Come back to Mommy and Daddy." "But Mommy, he doesn't want to go back to his cage. It makes him sad." Emma's voice carried the kind of matter-of-fact certainty that children use when explaining something obvious to adults who should know better. Dr. Marcus Chen's voice joined the transmission. "Emma, the creature is very dangerous. Even if it seems nice now, it could hurt you without meaning to." The Void Stalker lowered itself to the ground, bringing its massive head to Emma's eye level. "Your parents are correct, small one. I am dangerous. My very nature is to destroy. Perhaps you should go to them." Emma looked into the creature's dark eyes, seeing something that all the adults had missed. "You're not dangerous to me. You're just scared and sad. When I'm scared and sad, my mommy and daddy help me feel better. Maybe I can help you feel better too." The philosophical implications of this statement sent ripples through the minds of every being monitoring the situation. Here was a human child, barely 3 years old, offering comfort and friendship to a creature that entire civilizations considered a force of pure destruction. Dr. Elizara Venn, the station's chief xenopsychologist, had been monitoring the situation from the science center. Her four-armed form worked frantically at multiple data terminals, analyzing every aspect of the interaction between the child and the Void Stalker. "Commander," she called over the communication system, her voice tight with excitement and disbelief. "I'm reading biochemical changes in the creature that shouldn't be possible. Its stress hormones are at the lowest levels we've ever recorded. Its brain patterns are showing activity in regions we've never seen active before." "What does that mean?" Commander Zethara asked. "The creature is experiencing emotions we didn't think it was capable of. Contentment. Joy. What humans might call happiness." Doctor. Ven paused as another reading came through. "And there's something else. The child is releasing pheromones that seem to have a calming effect on aggressive species. We've seen this before with human interactions with non-human species, but never to this degree." This information reached Dr. Sarah Chen in the security center, and her scientific mind began to make connections. "The bonding mechanism," she whispered. "Marcus, remember my research on human empathic resonance? Children especially have an ability to form emotional connections across species barriers." Marcus nodded slowly. "The evolutionary adaptation that helped early humans domesticate other species. But this is beyond anything previously documented." Back in the hydroponics bay, Emma had begun showing the Void Stalker her favorite plants. She led the massive creature through the growing areas with the confidence of a tour guide, pointing out interesting flowers and explaining which ones reminded her of pictures in her books. "This one looks like the dragon flower in my fairy tale book," she said, indicating a large purple blossom that pulsed with bioluminescent veins. "And these tall ones are like the trees in the giant's garden." The Void Stalker found itself genuinely interested in these observations. Its analytical mind, trained for warfare and survival, began to see the plants through the lens of wonder that Emma provided. Colors became more vivid, shapes more fascinating, and the entire environment transformed from a tactical space into something approaching beautiful. "Tell me about your world," Emma said, settling down beside a small stream that ran through the garden area. "Was it pretty like this?" The creature lowered itself beside her, its massive form creating a protective alcove around the small human. "It was different. Darker skies, with 3 moons that cast shadows in purple and silver. The plants grew tall as buildings and glowed with their own light. The mountains sang when the wind blew through the crystal formations at their peaks." Emma's eyes widened with fascination. "It sounds magical. Why did your people fight if they lived somewhere so beautiful?" The question cut to the heart of millennia of pain and regret. "We forgot how to share. We forgot that the world was large enough for all of us. We became so focused on having more, on being stronger than our neighbors, that we lost sight of what made life worth living. My daddy says that sharing makes things better, not worse," Emma observed. "When I share my toys with other kids, we all have more fun." The profound simplicity of this statement struck the Void Stalker like a revelation. This child understood concepts that his entire civilization had forgotten. The idea that cooperation could lead to greater joy for everyone was something his species had abandoned in favor of competition and conflict. The security team had remained at a distance, watching this impossible conversation between a human toddler and a creature capable of destroying entire space stations. Morin had contacted the highest levels of Galactic Council authority, but no one seemed to know how to handle a situation where the galaxy's greatest threat was apparently learning life lessons from a 3-year-old. "Sir," Operative Vex reported quietly, "we're receiving communications from across the galaxy. Word has spread about this situation. The Council wants the creature contained immediately, but Galactic Human Relations is demanding protection for the child and recognition of her apparent diplomatic contact." Morin struggled with conflicting priorities. His duty was clear: contain the threat and protect civilians. But the threat wasn't threatening anyone, and the civilian was apparently in no danger. Emma had begun singing softly to herself, a lullaby her mother often sang at bedtime. The Void Stalker listened with fascination, having never heard music before. The concept of sounds arranged for beauty rather than communication was entirely foreign, yet the melody stirred something deep in its consciousness. "What is that sound?" it asked when Emma paused. "It's a song. My mommy sings it when I'm sleepy. It makes me feel safe and happy." Emma looked up at the creature. Do you want me to teach it to you? The idea of learning to sing was so far outside the Voidstalker's conception of itself that it almost refused. But the memory of how the melody had made it feel something warm and peaceful overrode its skepticism. Yes, it said quietly. For the next several minutes, the hydroponics bay echoed with the sound of a human child teaching a lullaby to the galaxy's most feared predator. Emma would sing a line, then encourage the creature to repeat it. The Voidstalker's voice, which had only ever been used for roars of rage and growls of threat, gradually learned to produce gentler sounds. The security team watched in stunned silence as the creature that had been the subject of their nightmares learned to sing a human lullaby. This is impossible, Morin muttered, lowering his weapon completely. Everything we know about that creature says this shouldn't be happening. Dr. Ven's voice crackled through the communicator. Chief, I think we've been looking at this all wrong. The Voidstalker isn't just a mindless predator, it's a being capable of learning, of forming emotional bonds. It's been isolated and treated as a monster for so long that it forgot how to be anything else. And now? Commander Zethara asked. Now it's remembering what it's like to have a friend. The breakthrough in understanding came when Emma, growing tired from their adventure, curled up against the Voidstalker's side for a nap. The creature immediately adjusted its position to provide better support and warmth. Its massive claws carefully arranged to create a protective barrier around the sleeping child. As Emma slept, the Voidstalker kept watch with the intensity of a guardian, its senses extended to monitor every approach, every sound, every potential threat to the small being under its protection. For the first time in its existence, its formidable abilities were being used not to destroy, but to protect something precious. The transformation was visible to everyone monitoring the situation. This wasn't the same creature that had been contained in Sector 7. This was something new. Something unprecedented in galactic history. A being learning to choose love over violence, protection over destruction. But their peaceful moment was about to be shattered. Long-range sensors detected an approaching fleet of Council enforcement vessels, armed with weapons specifically designed to eliminate threats of the Voidstalker's magnitude. The political and military pressure to end this situation was mounting, regardless of the remarkable developments taking place. As Emma slept peacefully against the side of the galaxy's deadliest creature, the future hung in the balance. Would this unprecedented bond between human and monster be recognized as a breakthrough in interspecies relations, or would it be ended by those who saw only the threat and not the miracle? The Voidstalker sensed the approaching danger and knew that their time of peace was running short. Whatever happened next would determine not just their fate, but the fate of every being who dared to believe that understanding could triumph over fear. The Council enforcement fleet dropped out of hyperspace with a thunderous display of military might that sent shockwaves through the surrounding star system. 27 vessels, each capable of destroying entire planets, arranged themselves in a perfect siege formation around Station Kepler 7. The flagship, a massive dreadnought called the Galactic Hammer, positioned itself directly in front of the station's main docking bay. High Admiral Korvax, Supreme Commander of the Enforcement Fleet, stood on his bridge, studying the tactical displays, with the cold precision of someone who had never encountered a problem that couldn't be solved with overwhelming firepower. His reptilian features bore the scars of countless battles, and his yellow eyes held no trace of doubt or mercy. "Status report," he commanded, his voice carrying the authority of absolute military power. "Station contains 3,247 civilians. Admiral," reported his tactical officer. "The Voidstalker has been located in Hydroponics Bay 7, apparently in the company of a human child." Admiral Korvax's tail lashed with irritation. "Irrelevant. The creature must be destroyed before it can cause more damage. Prepare the Omega Protocol weapons." "Sir," the communications officer interrupted hesitantly, "we're receiving urgent transmissions from the human ambassador. She's demanding to speak with you directly." "Put her through," Korvax growled. Ambassador Elena Rodriguez appeared on the main screen, her dark eyes blazing with diplomatic fury. Behind her stood Dr. Sarah and Marcus Chen, their faces etched with parental terror and determination. "Admiral Korvax, I am formally invoking Article 7 of the Galactic Protection Accords. Any action taken against the Voidstalker while it's in proximity to a human child must be cleared through the Human Council. Ambassador, Korvax replied with barely contained disdain, your species has been part of the Galactic Council for less than 50 years. You do not have the authority to interfere with a Class Omega threat response. That creature has my daughter, Doctor. Sarah Chen stepped forward, her voice carrying the fierce protectiveness that only a mother could project. And from what we've observed, she's in no immediate danger. In fact, they appear to have formed some kind of bond. Korvax's laugh was harsh and dismissive. Madam, the Void Stalker has destroyed 13 different research facilities and killed over 4,000 beings in the past century. It does not form bonds. It kills. Then explain why my daughter is still alive, Marcus Chen challenged. Explain why a creature that supposedly kills everything it encounters has been gentle and protective with a 3-year-old child. The Admiral had no answer for that, and his silence spoke volumes. On Station Kepler 7, the tension was building to a breaking point. Emma had awakened from her nap to find the Void Stalker in a state of high agitation, its massive head raised toward the ceiling as if it could see through the station's hull to the fleet beyond. What's wrong? Kitty? Emma asked, her small hand reaching out to touch the creature's arm. You're all tense and scary again. Danger comes from the sky, small one, the Void Stalker replied, its voice heavy with ancient weariness. Ships filled with beings who believe the only solution to fear is destruction. Emma looked around the beautiful hydroponics bay, with its glowing plants and peaceful streams. But we're not doing anything bad. We're just being friends. Sometimes, little one, friendship is not enough to stop those who have chosen violence. The creature lowered its massive head to meet Emma's eyes. I think our time together is ending. No, Emma declared, with the absolute defiance that only children could muster. I won't let them take you away. You're my friend, and friends protect each other. The Void Stalker was moved by her declaration, but its enhanced senses could detect the energy signatures of weapons designed specifically to kill creatures like itself. You are very brave, Emma. But you are also very small. Some things cannot be stopped by friendship alone. Emma considered this seriously, her 3-year-old mind working through a problem that had baffled military strategists and diplomats. Maybe friendship can't stop them, she said finally. But maybe it can change their minds. Before the Void Stalker could ask what she meant, Security Chief Morin's voice echoed through the hydroponics bay's communication system. This is Chief Morin. The Admiral has given us 1 hour to resolve this situation before he begins bombardment of the station. Emma, we need you to come away from the creature so we can evacuate you to safety. Emma stood up and walked to the nearest communication panel, her small form barely reaching the controls. Mr. Morin, can you hear me? Yes, Emma. Please listen carefully. You need to come with us right now. Can you bring the Admiral here instead? She asked with the innocence of someone who had no understanding of military hierarchy. I think he needs to meet my friend. The request was so absurd that it took several moments for anyone to respond. Finally, Morin's voice came back, strained with disbelief. Emma, admirals don't make social visits to containment areas, but how can he decide what to do if he doesn't know my friend? Emma asked, with unshakable logic. That's like deciding you don't like vegetables before you taste them. Commander Zethara, who had been monitoring the situation from the command center, found herself considering the child's suggestion. Chief Morin, perhaps we should relay the child's request to the fleet. Commander, with respect, we cannot ask a galactic high admiral to meet with the galaxy's most dangerous predator because a 3-year-old thinks it's a good idea. Why not? Dr. Sarah Chen's voice cut through the debate. What exactly do we have to lose at this point? If the Admiral is planning to destroy the station anyway, what harm could come from him seeing the situation firsthand? The debate raged for precious minutes, while Emma waited patiently by the communication panel. Finally, to everyone's amazement, Admiral Korvax's voice came through the speakers directly. This is Admiral Korvax. I will speak with the human child. Emma's face brightened immediately. Hi, Admiral. My name is Emma. What's your name? The question caught Korvax completely off guard. In his 60 years of military service, No one had ever asked him for his personal name during an official operation. My name is Korvax. That's a nice name, Admiral Korvax. I have a friend here that I'd like you to meet. His name is... Emma paused and looked at the Void Stalker. You know, I never asked your name. What should I call you? The Void Stalker found itself facing a question it had never considered. Its species had names, but its own had been lost centuries ago, in the violence that destroyed its world. I do not remember my name, little one. Then we should pick a new one, Emma declared. How about Starfriend? Because you came from the stars, and now you're my friend. The newly christened Starfriend felt something shift deep in its core programming. To have a name, to be called something other than creature or threat, was to be acknowledged as an individual being worthy of identity. Starfriend, it repeated, testing the syllables. I am Starfriend. Over the communication system, Admiral Korvax struggled to process what he was hearing. The reports had described a containment breach and a hostage situation. No one had mentioned names or friendship or the sound of genuine affection in a child's voice. Admiral Korvax, Emma continued. Starfriend is really nice, but he's very sad because people are mean to him. They put him in a cage and want to hurt him just because he's different. That's not fair, is it? The question struck at something Korvax had buried deep in his military training. The memory of his own childhood, when other species had looked at his reptilian features with fear and disgust. He had spent his entire career proving that he was more than his appearance, that he could be trusted with the responsibility of protecting the galaxy. Child, he said carefully, the creature you call Starfriend has caused great damage. Many beings have died, but he didn't want to hurt anybody. Emma replied with certainty that surprised everyone listening. He was just scared and lonely. When you're scared and lonely, sometimes you do things that hurt people, even when you don't mean to. But now he has a friend, so he doesn't have to be scared anymore. Dr. Elizara Ven's voice cut into the conversation from the Science Center. Admiral, if I may interject, our psychological analysis supports the child's assessment. The creature's aggression patterns correlate directly with isolation and threat response. In the presence of the human child, all hostile behaviors have ceased. That's impossible, Korvax stated firmly. The Void Stalker is a Class Omega threat. It cannot simply choose to be peaceful. Actually, Dr. Sarah Chen interjected from the command center. That's exactly what our research suggests is happening. My daughter has triggered what we call an empathic resonance cascade. It's a rare phenomenon where humans can create emotional connections that transcend species barriers. Emma, who had been listening to the adult conversation with the patience of someone accustomed to grown-ups talking about complicated things, finally spoke up again. Admiral Korvax, would you like to come visit us? I could introduce you properly to Starfriend. He's really very nice once you get to know him. The request hung in the air like a challenge to everything the Admiral had ever believed about military protocol, threat assessment, and the nature of galactic peace. Every regulation, every standard procedure, every lesson learned in decades of service said that the correct response was to politely decline and proceed with the destruction of the threat. But something in the child's voice, something in the complete absence of fear or guile, made him pause. In his long career, Korvax had seen the aftermath of countless conflicts, had witnessed the cycle of violence and retaliation that seemed to govern interspecies relations. He had never, however, encountered a situation where the solution might be as simple as a conversation. Admiral, his tactical officer whispered urgently, the fleet is awaiting your orders. Korvax looked at his bridge crew, at the displays showing enough firepower to sterilize a continent, at the faces of beings who had dedicated their lives to maintaining galactic order through strength. Then he made a decision that would be studied in military academies for generations to come. Prepare my personal transport, he announced. I'm going to the station. The stunned silence on the bridge was broken only by the soft hum of the ship's engines. Sir, the tactical officer managed. You cannot seriously be considering entering a containment zone with an active Class Omega threat. 1. Officer. Korvax replied with the full weight of his authority. I am considering the possibility that our threat assessment may have been incomplete. 20 minutes later, Admiral Korvax found himself walking through the corridors of Station Kepler 7, accompanied by a small security detail, and feeling more uncertain than he had in decades. The hydroponics bay doors slid open to reveal a scene that defied everything he thought he knew about the galaxy's most dangerous creature. Starfriend sat peacefully among the glowing plants, its massive form arranged to create a protective shelter around Emma, who was showing it pictures in a children's book. The creature's attention was completely focused on the child, listening with apparent fascination as she explained the story. And then the little prince made friends with the dragon, Emma was saying, and they went on adventures together and helped people who were in trouble. When Emma noticed the Admiral's arrival, her face lit up with delight. Admiral Korvax, you came. Starfriend, this is my new friend the Admiral. Starfriend raised its massive head and looked directly at Korvax. The Admiral's hand moved instinctively toward his weapon, but stopped when the creature simply nodded in greeting. Admiral, Starfriend said, its voice a rumble of distant thunder. Emma has told me much about you. She believes you are brave and strong, and that you protect people who cannot protect themselves. The directness of the statement caught Korvax off guard. Yes, that is my duty. Then we have the same purpose. Starfriend replied. I too wish to protect those who cannot protect themselves. I have learned this from Emma. Emma beamed with pride. See? I told you he was nice. Starfriend just needed someone to teach him about being friends. Admiral Korvax found himself in the unprecedented position of having a philosophical conversation with a creature he had come to destroy. Your species, he said carefully, has been responsible for significant destruction across the galaxy. Starfriend's expression grew sorrowful. Yes. We forgot the lessons that Emma teaches so easily. We chose fear over friendship, violence over understanding. I am the last of my kind, Admiral, and I carry the weight of all our mistakes. But you don't have to keep making them, Emma interjected with the wisdom that occasionally emerges from the mouths of children. Daddy says that every day is a chance to make better choices. The profound simplicity of this statement resonated through the communication system to every being listening across the station and the fleet. Here was a 3-year-old human child offering redemption to a creature that entire civilizations feared. Korvax lowered his weapon completely and took a step forward. What would you do? He asked Starfriend. If given the chance to make different choices, I would learn, Starfriend replied immediately. I would study the ways of peace that Emma shows me. I would use my abilities to protect rather than destroy. I would honor the memory of my people by becoming what they could have been. Emma clapped her hands excitedly. That's a wonderful idea. And I could teach you more things, like how to share, and how to help people, and how to make friends with everyone. Admiral Korvax looked around the hydroponics bay, at the peaceful scene before him, and made another decision that would reshape galactic policy. Computer, open a channel to the fleet. This is Admiral Korvax to all ships. Stand down from attack positions. Repeat. Stand down from attack positions. He paused, knowing that his next words would be recorded and analyzed by historians for centuries to come. The threat has been neutralized, not through destruction, but through understanding. The relief that flooded through Station Kepler 7 was palpable. Dr. Sarah and Marcus Chen rushed to the hydroponics bay to reunite with their daughter, their fears dissolving into joy as they saw her safe and happy. Emma ran to her parents, but turned back to include Starfriend in the reunion. Mommy, Daddy, this is my friend Starfriend. Can he come home with us? The question sparked immediate debate among the adults, but it was Admiral Korvax who provided the answer. Emma, your friend will need a special home where he can learn about being peaceful and where others can learn from him. I think the Galactic Council would be very interested in hearing about the friendship between humans and Starfriend. The arrangement that followed became known as the Kepler Accords, a groundbreaking treaty that established the first interspecies friendship protocol. Starfriend became not a prisoner, but a cultural ambassador, living on a specially designed habitat station where beings from across the galaxy could come to learn about peaceful coexistence. Emma visited every month, continuing her role as teacher and friend, Under her guidance, Starfriend developed into something unprecedented, a being that combined the power to destroy with the wisdom to create, the strength to dominate with the choice to nurture. The transformation rippled outward through galactic society. The concept that even the most feared beings could change, that friendship could triumph over centuries of hatred, became known as the Emma Doctrine. Diplomatic protocols were rewritten to include empathic considerations, and first contact procedures began to incorporate what became known as human emotional intelligence. Years later, when Emma was older and studying xenopsychology herself, she would often sit with Starfriend in their garden on New Harmony Station, reading together and discussing the philosophical implications of their friendship. Starfriend had become a renowned scholar of peace studies, its unique perspective helping to resolve conflicts across the galaxy. But to Emma, he would always be the sad, lonely creature who had just needed a friend. And to Starfriend, she would always be the small human who had seen past his fearsome appearance to the being within who was capable of love. The galaxy had learned that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe wasn't a weapon or a technology or a military fleet. Sometimes it was just a 3-year-old girl with enough love in her heart to see the good in everyone, even the galaxy's deadliest creature. The story of Emma and Starfriend became legend, proof that humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy wasn't their technology or their military might, but their extraordinary capacity for empathy and their unshakable belief that everyone deserved a chance at friendship. In the end, the galaxy's deadliest creature hadn't been defeated by force or contained by technology. It had been transformed by the simple, revolutionary act of a human child offering unconditional friendship to someone who had never experienced kindness. And in that transformation, the galaxy itself had become a little bit safer, a little bit kinder, and a little bit more hopeful about the possibility of peace among the stars.